So I play a lot of games, but specifically I really like this game. And I like this kind of game. Now imagine if those two games got together, had a consensual relationship, and then had a baby. And that, my friends, is Supervive. Supervive is a top-down battle royale, kind of designed around the League of Legends playstyle, but plays very much like a battle royale. No more going for the turrets, no more going for the nexus. Instead, you gotta be the last one standing. Now, there's a couple different game modes, but the main one that I think is going to make the esports scene is something called squads. It's 12 teams of 4 players on each team, and much like League of Legends, you get to pick the hunter that best suits your playstyle. Of course, you have the typical damage dealers, but there's also a class known as the controller that is able to control the map by its utilities. But as the resident healer in almost every single game I play, of course I gravitated more towards the protector role. Now, obviously, as the name suggests, they protect their allies by using healing spells, protecting abilities like big shields, or even tornadoes that blow the enemies away, leaving a little bit more room for your allies to move around in. So with the next level of beta testing here in the near future in August, I want to go ahead and release this video, which is pretty much an overall protector guide on these 3 hunters. Eluna, the Celestial Combat Medic. This hunter is probably by far my most favorite one to play. She is focused around fast auto attacks, great stuns, as well as a plethora of healing abilities that'll be able to assist your allies. First things first, let's talk a little bit about the passive ability that Eluna has. It's called the Backpack passive. See, in this game, much like any other battle royale, when an allied teammate goes down, they go into a temporary down status where another player can go up to them and take a certain amount of time. In this game, it's pretty long. I think it's around 4 or 5 seconds to resurrect that player. Now, usually the hunter has to hover over the dead body or the downed ally to be able to res them. Eluna has a passive where she is able to pick up that ally and take them away from danger. If you're familiar with Apex Legends, this is very reminiscent of the Newcastle character where he's able to move while resurrecting his teammates. Though Eluna doesn't really get a shield in the process, it's a similar mechanic. Now, Eluna's auto attack, or her left mouse button, is called the Moonshot. Basically, all you have to do is just tap that left mouse button, hit your enemies, and what that's going to do is not only restore the mana that you've lost by using all the other spells, but also it's going to have an escalating damage effect. So I don't know the specific numbers, but let's say, for example, the first time you hit them for 2 damage, then you hit them for 4 damage and 6 damage and then 8 damage and so on and so forth. I'm sure there's a capping effect at some point, but long story short, the first shot is going to be less damage than your last shot there. Now, if Eluna takes a break for a second and then she shoots again using her auto attack, that next shot will be empowered and do a little bit more damage as well. Eluna's secondary attack is called Bound by Fate. Essentially what happens is she shoots this large orb at an enemy and it lands in that space where it makes contact with that enemy and roots everyone around them. This is a fantastic stun, whether it's to control the fight, maybe you want to root half the team while your team focuses on the other 2 players, or you want to initiate. It's a good way to root that player and the whole team converge on that one spot. It's a really good controlling ability to have, and for a character that already does so much, does high damage when it comes to auto attacks, and has the ability to heal, Bound by Fate is a phenomenal thing to be able to put into that kit. Now, in the future, when I'm talking about these hunters, I'm probably going to skip over the left shift button because a lot of these hunters have the same left shift. Essentially, what happens is if you are grounded, if you're not flying, you can use the left shift button and you can do a little dash forward. Or if you're flying, you can use the left shift button and boost forward pretty significantly. The reason why I'm going to skip over this in the future is because pretty much every hunter has one of these abilities. It's just named something different. In Aluna's case, it's lighter than air. It's beneficial, it's fantastic, but it's not any different than any other characters out there. And this is where Aluna really shines. She has, as her E ability, a rejuvenating aura, which means she summons a healing zone around her. Basically, it's just like the moon orb that we were talking about a little bit earlier. There is an area of an effect, and if any of her allies are caught in that area of effect around her, they will be healed. This area effect is centralized around Aluna, so wherever Aluna goes, this area of effect will follow. But if she hits E one more time, she will throw that area of effect towards an ally, centralizing that AoE on that ally character. Now, the rejuvenating aura does have a 15-second cooldown, which in the grand scheme of things isn't absolutely horrible, but it is on the longer side of cooldowns, so it's good to have our ult, which is called Divine Intervention, which also is a healing ability. Now, depending on when you use this ability, it does one of two things. You can hold it on an ally and heal them pretty significantly. It does a lot more healing than your E does. Or you can use it on wisps or downed characters to resurrect them pretty much instantly. The reason why I like Aluna so much is because she is a very versatile character. You can sit in the background, throw your heals in when necessary, do a little bit of poking, or you can be the healy tanky boy, where you're in the front of the lines, healing yourself and soaking up all the damage so that your hunters can do all of the damage to the enemy. Really fun character, and that is why she is my favorite. But that's enough with Luna. Let's get into the next one. The next hunter that I want to talk about is Oath, the unstoppable mecha paladin. Have you played Overwatch? Do you know Reinhardt? You know, the guy with the big shield and the big hammer? Yeah, copy paste him into this game. I mean, he's basically the same exact thing. He's got a shield, he's got a healing ability, which Reinhardt doesn't have, but is beneficial. He's got a big hammer, and of course his ultimate, Hammer Down. They had to include that into this game. Long story short, this character is able to control the tide of the battle by putting up a shield and deflecting the enemy team from hitting your team. He's able to go in, do a lot of damage with a charged up auto attack, as well as healing, right? He's kind of has the best kit of all, but you can't play him like Aluna and sit in the background. He's very much a frontliner. So before we get into the passive, I want to talk about this guy's hammer. Essentially what he can do is he can press the left mouse button and throw his hammer in one direction, hitting the enemy team, and if he presses left mouse button again, he will recall the hammer, much like Thor, the god of thunder, which if it hits them on the way back, it once again does damage. Or what he can do is hold the left mouse button and it'll charge up a winding swing, much like the god of thunder again. And if it lands on the enemy team, it will actually knock that enemy back. So it does have a knockback effect. But the reason why I wanted to talk about the hammer first, his left mouse button, is because his passive is based off of that left mouse button effect. Oath's passive is called Knockout. Knocking an enemy into a wall will stun them. So once again, if he charges up his main auto attack, he will then hit that enemy, and if they hit a wall, a tree, or any structure, it will then put them into a root effect or a stun effect. Now, this is where Reinhardt comes in. Oath's right mouse button pulls up a wall. It's like an ethereal wall that glows. Essentially, It's exactly that. It just shields every one of the allies. Now, the allies can shoot through it, but the enemies can't shoot through it the other way. Now, similar to Reinhardt, if he hits his left shift button, he will perform what's called an empowered bash. Essentially, what happens is he charges forward a little bit and bumping the enemies. I think that's the best term for it. Doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it does get Oath into the fight when he needs to get into the fight, and once again keeps his shield up so he can protect everybody behind him. Oath's left shift when not holding up a shield is called the 360 smash. Essentially what happens is he just dashes forward and does like a 360 spin move, once again similar to Reinhardt, and damages everybody in a radius. Now if he jumps and glides and uses that, he uses that kind of like a helicopter to propel him forward a little bit. So once again, a propelling motion to move him from point A to point B. Oh, thank goodness. And they stepped away from Reinhardt just a tad bit to create this guy's E, which is called Purify Zone. This is pretty much the exact same thing as Aluna's Purifying Zone or her healing ability. Essentially, the healing ability is in an area of effect around Oath, but it's more around his hammer. So wherever his hammer is, that's where the area of effect is. So Aluna, she could throw her heal at an ally and be able to hook it onto them specifically. Oath will be able to throw his hammer, and wherever his hammer lands, that's where the area of effect heal will be. Now, one benefit that Oath has, a little bit better than Aluna in this case, is basically he uses this AoE to start to resurrect an ally. So for example, if they are in Wisp form, they are knocked, he can throw his hammer at that ally's location, press his Purifying Zone, which is the E button, and start to resurrect that player without even being in the vicinity of that player to resurrect them. So it is very helpful, and with a 14-second cooldown, you can do that very often. It makes bringing that ally back into the fight a whole lot easier. And just when you thought we were getting away from Reinhardt a little bit, they bring back the hammer down. Oath's ultimate ability is called Earth Shatter. And that probably sounds a little bit familiar. It's basically the same thing. Essentially what happens is when he clicks his R ability, he puts down this area of effect that starts incrementally closer to him and then progressively gets further and further and further, creating these fissures out of the ground that deal damage to the enemies. It also stuns them a little bit and slows them a little bit, and it's a relatively big area of effect. So once again, very much like the hammer down, except the stuns don't last as long. Now, like I said at the beginning when talking about Oath, he is very much an up-in-your-face personal kind of guy. I don't like throwing my hammer as much to do damage. It's nice when you can poke him, but I think that his true ability comes with his charged left mouse button attack, and that's when you do a lot of damage. It's nice to be able to go back and forth and be able to shield your team as well, playing a little bit more defensively, but typically I feel like Oath is played at the front of the group. He's never really in the back. He can throw his hammer back and ultimately heal some of his allies, but in the grand scheme of things, I think he's front line, very much tank of the group, Reinhardt character. I mean, you know what they say, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I like him. He's fun. And last, and probably definitely least, Zeph, the Healing Tempest. Zeph's an interesting character that I feel like needs to be buffed in the future. His healing abilities are easier than any other protector role to use, and he does have some wind abilities that can control the fight a little bit. It can push the enemies away or push them a little bit closer to your allies. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel like Zeph is very much C tier, lowest out of the three, but he can be fun to play. Let's go over his abilities. So starting with Zeph's passive, he has something called Windswept and Replenish, which has multiple different effects, but ultimately what happens is whenever he hits an enemy player, it applies an effect, and it's called Windswept. Whenever he uses any of his abilities, whether it's his auto attack, his right click, or even his ult, I think does a little bit of damage, it applies, or it activates this windswept passive, and it not only hurts the enemy team, but it also heals you in the process. So you can do damage and heal at the same time. So I think in that regard, he may be more of a combat medic than a Luna, but a little bit less so because he only heals himself when he does that. There's really nothing special about this guy's left mouse button, his main auto attack. Essentially what happens if you click it, it will shoot a small ball of wind at the enemy. It does damage, just like any other auto attack. But if you hold it, it charges a stronger shot. Timing wise, I feel like the holding strong shot is used a little bit more than just left clicking. It does a significant amount more damage as well. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't know, it's very situational. Either way, if you hit somebody with this left mouse button, it applies the windswept passive that we were talking about previously. Now, Zeph's healing ability isn't actually his E, it's his right mouse button, which means he doesn't really have a damaging attack as a right mouse button. Instead, he heals himself or his ally. Now, at the very beginning, it starts with 2 charges, but as you progress, I think it goes up to 5 charges, so you can use it 5 times on the same ally or on the same character, or you can spread it out between your team. Maybe your whole team is taking damage, so 1 charge here, 1 charge there, 1 charge over here, and another charge over there, so on and so forth. It's incredibly easy to use because all you have to do is point and click. As soon as you right mouse button on your ally, it automatically applies that healing ability. Now, you would think that this would be phenomenal, but it is very singular. You can't heal multiple characters with 1 heal. You can only heal 1 ally at a time, so you better be within radius of them to be able to heal them. And once again, it does have charges, so you can't just continuously spam it. Once again, Zeph does have a dash. He can dash when he's on the ground, or if he's flying, he can dash. Either way, you can hold it, charge it, and dash a little bit further, creating a tornado around you. It does go further than I think the rest, but once again, it's just the dash ability. Now, Zeph's E is actually very unique. Essentially what it does is he throws a grenade of air into a location, and similar to the AoE effect to a Luna, anyone that's caught in that circle then gets pulled to the center of that circle. If there are multiple enemies that are caught and they get pulled to the center and they slam into each other, there is a stun effect that applies. So it's beneficial to try to hit multiple people with your vacuum grenade. Ultimately, it's going to provide that stun, but it really just gets players or gets the enemies where you want them so that your fighters can do some damage. Now, Zeph's ult is really fun, and I think is one of the things that makes him unique and a viable option, whereas the rest of his kit I'm not really much of a fan of. His ult is called Second Wind. Essentially, much like Oath, he goes ahead and he places down an area of effect in front of him. Basically, one big tornado goes in front of him, and it heals all the allies that it hits and damages all the enemies that it hits. So much like Oath's Hammer Down, but instead it now heals allies as well. So it's beneficial for Zeph to kind of hide in the back a little bit sometimes so that he can just use that ult in a pinch. Also, another reason why Zeph might want to sit in the back is because, say the rest of his team dies and they go down to be wisps, they're in the knockdown status, he could use this Second Wind, and anyone that it hits will resurrect them passively. So there is a timer, but he doesn't have to sit there over those bodies to be able to resurrect his teammates. He can go ahead and just perform one ultimate resurrection spell, essentially, and bring everybody back to life. So that can bring a 1v4 back to a 4v4 really easily. I think the only thing that makes Zeph a protector is the fact that he does have healing abilities. Yes, his R heals. Yes, his right mouse button heals. And that makes him a viable protector. But I feel like Zeph may belong a little bit more in the controller category because of his E ability being able to control where people are going, be able to stun them. It's very useful if you want to nuke the enemy team, basically. If you have a team comp that could basically nuke everybody, it might be good to get all of those enemies in one location so that your fighters can do all the damage necessary. Long story short, everybody, I think that these 3 protector classes are super fun, and they have 3 very different and unique play styles. I think they can all be viable options, including Zeph, but my favorite healer, the person that I think will do the best in comp is Aluna. I feel like all her abilities are basically lined up to do that. Not only does she do a massive amount of damage, but she has stuns that are relatively fast on the cooldown rating, as well as heals that can be, both close and further away based off of around another player. I feel like that may be a little bit more beneficial than just having a shield, for example, as far as Oath goes. But I think this is gonna do it for today. If you're watching this, chances are I'm about to go live playing Supervive. The beta is coming out with some more play testing here in the near future. I plan to stream all 4 days. So check this channel periodically, subscribe if you want to be notified when I do go live. We're gonna have fun, we're gonna be a little bit more strategic and determined to be a higher rank, but we're gonna see how that goes. Ultimately, I want to play pretty much every character and get the feel and figure out what the balance is, who's OP, who's not OP, but more importantly, who's more fun for me to play, who do I do well with. But thank you guys for watching. I'll talk at you guys in the next one. Peace.